All right, we can't talk about Pete Alonso enough on this podcast for good reason. Pete, inching his way here towards Darryl Strawberry's all-time Mets home run record here. He passed David Wright this weekend, and Wright, as gracious as ever, sending Pete a really nice video that they posted. It's great to see Wright just continues to be such an awesome ambassador for this club, and even as a guy like Pete passes a record, a standing of his in the books. But more interestingly, Joe is a friend of the show, Will Salmon, who we've had on multiple times. He's as good as anybody when it comes to long form pieces and covering the team, all his stuff on The Athletic. And of course, a guy you could watch on SNY a lot. He had a really interesting piece, Joe, about what Pete is doing off the field. And what stood out to me, Joe, wasn't Pete's offseason, because when a guy like this is a classic kind of recycling bin in sports. When a guy gets off to an incredible start during a season, and I don't blame writers for doing this. These are the stories we want to read and hear told. You get the flashback. Oh, what did they do in the offseason that they look like this now? What was so unique about this story to me, Joe, and it's something that's gone on now that Pete's with Boris Corp as his agency. Pete is going into, or before the ball, he even gets to the ballpark, game plans from people that work with the Boris Corp agency. And a lot of people are reacting to this way. Is this concerning that he's doing something outside of the team? I read this as a little bit of, he shows up to the Mets meetings for that day and is already he's studying before even studying for the test. And now he's coming in with information that is beneficial specifically to him and how he can now apply that information to what the Mets are giving him. And we hear this on the broadcast, especially with Ronnie and Keith, that just played in a different era. And sometimes they bring up, like, there's a lot of information to digest. Some guys like it, some guys don't. It's clearly working for Pete right now, Joe, that he is preparing before it's time to prepare. And this is just kind of elevating his game, where you kind of sit here as a Mets fan and you're thinking, this is awesome. I hope it goes on forever. And then the other side naturally to you is, are the Mets going to be able to retain Pete Alonso? What does the deal look like now? What excites me, Joe, is that even in his 30s now, it feels like Pete Alonso, who's always had physical talent, is mentally evolving as a hitter, where this isn't sustainable, although we'll see. Who am I to say that? But he might age a lot better than anyone, including David Stearns, even once thought.
He is taking his preparation to another level. And the thing with Alonso was, for up until the last 2 years where it's been a struggle for him, I think he just kind of got by being a hitter and not having to think as much. And then he ran to 2 years of struggles. And I think that has opened his eyes, and bringing Boris Corp in has opened his eyes. And that level of preparation is only a benefit for him now and in the future, as you said. And the one thing that I want to say is, I think the ultimate takeaway, because as you said, as good as things are going for the Mets, there's always going to be a segment that is looking for what is wrong for a team that over the last 162 games has won more games than any team in the sport. And the spotlight, due to struggling with runners in scoring position, everything is geared towards Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes, the hitting coaches. And the piece was excellent by Will, as you mentioned, and a lot of fans' reaction is, well, what are those guys doing if he's going to outside? I would like to say Pete Alonso is not the only. There are many players that do what Pete Alonso's doing across Major League Baseball. So this is not unique to him, but for him, it is unique, if that makes sense, where it's just different and evolving his game. And as you said, Connor, evolving mentally, because that's important as you continue to grow as a baseball player. And we talked about this last week with that mailbag question about player development. You're never not developing, because there's always that back and forth cat and mouse game of trying to one up each other. So any advantage that Pete Alonso could get, I support it. And clearly the results are bearing fruit for the Mets.